evening, I'm Helga Jansen-Daugbjerg and welcome to Democracy in Action, the show where we talk issues affecting you and your community. Cape Town is one of the most unequal cities in the world. A history of colonialism and apartheid has created an economic divide that runs largely along race lines. The same divide is true for access to land and adequate housing. There is very little security of tenure for millions of Cape Townians who are predominantly low-income black, coloured and refugee families. We have seen this play out in the courts where large numbers of evictions are causing the displacement of low-income families renting in the last few mixed-race, mixed-income inner-city suburbs, relocated to slums on the outskirts. In this episode of Democracy in Action, we have a two-part conversation. We talk to the community of the Bo-Kaap, we talk to the community of Steenvilla and find out their experience of social housing and evictions. Let us look and see what they've been saying.
The issue of land in South Africa, Blikkersdorp, Woodstock, Bo-Kaap, Khayelitsha, Waterkant, and many more areas are being dispossessed.
I think one of the things, the challenges that we face in Bo-Kaap and people like areas like Bo-Kaap is the question of gentrification. Gentrification might sound a very big term, but it's a very simple concept. It's where rich people take over an area reserved or where poorer people economically used to stay. They then hype up the rates of the area, the value of the properties, and make it very impossible for poorer people to stay where they stayed here for generations. Now, Bo-Kaap is no different to that example. What we also are fighting about is not about our heritage only in the HPOZ and how to protect our heritage for the future. But what we are fighting against is the question of, you're quite correct, dispossession. For a person like me that don't want to sell their home, property value means nothing. It's more emotional value. It's my home. I've been here all the years. My father been there, my mother's been there. My community is here and things like that. So property values to us means nothing. And that's a false way of placing value to our homes.
Welcome back to Democracy in Action. We're talking the issue of land. With me in studio to discuss this is Nkanyiso Gumede, land researcher at the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies based at the University of the Western Cape.
Thank you very much.
We're also joined by Fowzia Achmat, Vice Chairperson of the Bo-Kaap Ratepayers and Civic Association.
That's right. Hi.
Welcome to both of you and thank you for joining us to talk about this very emotive issue. Nkanyiso, let's start with you. Section 25 of the Constitution talks about property and land. What does the gazetting of this in late 2018 mean for our society?
Last year in December, an expropriation bill was gazetted by government where comments were called from interested parties. The introduction of this bill is an aim by government to have more mechanisms at its disposal to be able to acquire land. So this expropriation bill, it presents an opportunity for government to acquire more land and then increase or enable access to the people, be it in the urban areas or in the communal areas. But it also presents danger to some of the communities that already own land, because if government if government wants to expropriate that piece of land, then those communities are entitled to legal recourse. But we know that some of these communities may not have the resources to go and approach the courts. That is why in the high-level panel report, there is a recommendation that there should be a land rights protector where whenever a government engages in acts that are not satisfactory to communities, that communities can go and complain. Yes.
Can I just ask, so the danger is that communities who are historically situated on the land or in conservation areas,
Yes.
they can engage according to the act, but of course it's very costly. But in the case where communities are wealthy, what does this mean for land patterns, land ownership patterns, excuse me?
The expropriation bill actually it is aimed at expropriating land, but it does mention that expropriation has to go with compensation, and this compensation has to be just and equitable. But now the question of what just and equitable actually means, it remains a mystery, because currently we have not had test cases, because according to the property clause or section 25, there are some considerations that have to be made before compensation is paid, and those include the current use of the property, the history of how the property was acquired, and also the market value, and also the amount of investment that government has invested in that particular land.
Yeah.
So in a sense, expropriation does have the potential to make land available, but there needs to be compensation, which is just and equitable.
So it would seem as if the property clause politically is a fine balancing act between the forces of money and the government needing to balance the historical, the constitutional, and the just administration and transformation of land. I want to bring Fowzia into this. The Bo-Kaap residents have first-hand experience of this balancing act. Just explain to our viewers what the situation is around the willing seller, the willing buyer, and this very important piece of history of Cape Town.
I think what is important for us to understand, firstly, we mustn't think that Bo-Kaap was not affected by forced removals, right? Because Bo-Kaap, if you look at Bo-Kaap today, it's not the same Bo-Kaap we had years ago, but we will come back to that, because I'm listening to the issue of land. I think Bo-Kaap is also an aging community. It is not a young community. Our children cannot find houses in Bo-Kaap. So we are growing older, but our children have to move out. And what has happened over the years is that foreign buyers came and they offered. And because the rates have become so high, people started selling their houses because they couldn't afford the rates. And maintenance of houses became more expensive. Like I said, because we're an aging community, people started selling their houses. But I think we also need to understand it was that kind of force in terms of not having enough money to pay high rates. So this was the one way out. We as the Civic Association for the last probably 20 years have been asking for people not to sell their houses. But it's difficult. You can't tell people not to sell their houses, you know, especially when they're in economic predicaments. But as we became aware of the gentrification, and I think our community did not necessarily understand gentrification, because we've been fighting gentrification for over the last 20 years already. And it started off with a refinery, and I must say that, a refinery that was given permission to make jewelry and smelt gold, etc., within our community. So that is where gentrification started already. And we started, but because it was intangible, people didn't see gentrification. It was difficult for them to understand. And when the developers now started buying and communities see what was happening, then they realized that this is ours, we need to protect it. And I think for the community to become so unified to protect an historical heritage area, we're not speaking about just any other area. And I think we need to understand, and I'm not wanting to be biased because I am from Bo-Kaap. I think what is important for us to understand that this is history. And the unfortunate thing is, this history of Bo-Kaap is not written in our history books. Nobody really knows about Bo-Kaap until Bo-Kaap became so popular now. In fact, Bo-Kaap has been more popular overseas than it's been in our own country, because so many foreigners who visit, tourists who visit, they come to Bo-Kaap. But be that as it may, I think South Africans have started realizing there's this little area that is of importance. So what is important for us is to understand the historical value, the heritage value, and not just architectural value, but living heritage. And I'm seeing this whole issue with District 6 in terms of fighting the Adhan, now moaning about the Adhan. I was born in District 6. That's also a heritage site. So the city must sort itself out.
I want to just press pause there for a moment and bring Nkanyiso into this. So the picture and the scenario that Fowzia sketches, I see you shaking your head.
Yes.
I want to throw this at you. Anti-constitutional, 21st century forced removal.
Yeah, actually what we see here is actually an opposite of what the state should be doing, which is to secure people's rights. Because according to the Constitution, if you look at section 25(6) of the Constitution, it says that the state must take legislative measures to ensure that people's land rights are protected. But now when you come up with ways of securing those rights, you need to come up with ways that do not expose them to where their land rights are tradable. Because now you hear that she's saying that some of the people have ended up selling their land because of the investments that are coming in. So it's basically an opposite of what the state should be doing. And it's mostly informed by the fact that government always tries to impose how development should look like. Yes, because for people like those in Bo-Kaap, I assume they've got unregistered land rights. So now
Can I just please pause there?
Yes.
Unregistered, just explain what that means.
By unregistered, I mean you know that in South Africa you've got a title. We've got a title deed,
yeah.
yes. When you do, some people have got title deeds, but about close to 60% of South Africans do not have their land rights recognized legally. I'll make an example. For people in the communal areas, they don't have title deeds. So those people are regarded as those with unregistered land rights. But still, those people, there is an act that protects them from arbitrary deprivation. Yeah. And that act is a PLAAS, which is an Interim Protection of Land Rights Act. Yes. And it actually says that before they can be deprived of their land, there needs to be a consent from them. So now what government fails to do, they fail to understand or to appreciate or acknowledge the conceptions of development from those whom the development is targeting. Because in this case, we are seeing a government who's making land available to the outsiders, who, when they come in, it's then end up affecting those
Yes.
who should be protected by the state.
Let's just bring Fowzia in here again, because exactly on that point, when you were speaking earlier, you spoke about that over the last 20 years, and we all know this, living in Cape Town, one of the most expensive cities in the country, that the property taxes, rates, etc., kind of pushed people out. Is this not where is the city of Cape Town in all of this? Because the way that you explain, the state has an imperative to protect the rights of people, yet the city of Cape Town clearly hasn't done that.
I was listening to him, and we're speaking about legislation and we're speaking about the constitution, etc. But you know, the one thing that bothers me is the bylaws of the city. Now, to what extent do we say that the constitution can overrule those bylaws or legislation can overrule those bylaws? And the unfortunate thing is I don't know, and it's just coming to my head now whilst he's speaking about legislation and constitution. And I think often we as a community say we need to understand the legislation, we need to understand the constitution, but our problem is we do not have the time because we are volunteers working in our community, or we do not necessarily have the academic understanding of the legislation and the constitution. And for me, this is a very interesting part now. But coming back, I think politics play a big role in all of this. And the unfortunate thing is that, and I'm going to say it, the DA don't care about us. They care about making money. They care about their rich brothers and their rich sisters. So this is why we're having this problem. Number one, they can sell all the open land in Bo-Kaap because they can get a lot of money for the land they're selling. With us as pensioners, we have rebate, right? What do you call it?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's very little. Nou moet ek nog vir julle rebates gee. Julle is ou mense. Julle is lastig, man. I like to speak like this because then people understand. Julle is lastig. So if we can sell to the rich, we get all the money. And the problem with that block building is that we're not sure how that land was sold, and we're not sure how St. Monica's next door was sold.
Can we just, I want to, because some of our viewers might not know, so I want to ask the question, because as we're sitting here now, the Lion Street site and parts of the Bo-Kaap have already been declared National Heritage Sites. And so this was a victory for the community. But the city in Cape Town maintains pushing the willing seller and willing buyer approach. And that's where the Block Street situation comes in.
I think there was this is the story. In 2013, our community was asked to start looking at the HPOZ, the Heritage Protection Overlay Zone. We finished that within a couple of months, maybe like a year. We had a whole participatory process with the community and we finished the document, and we submitted the document to the mayor, which was then Patricia Delong. We requested every time what's happening because we could see that the land was being sold. So we wanted to know, as soon as we get the HPOZ document back and we know what it is, what it means for us, then maybe they cannot sell the land. But that document was held on to for at least 3 to 4 years. And that is where all this land selling has been happening. So for me, the city is one of the biggest problems. And this is why I say, so we have legislation, we have constitution, but they make bylaws to conveniently look after themselves.
So let me bring Nkanyiso into this. Is this an example of state gone rogue, and the state being the city of Cape Town, on the issue of land development?
Yes.
Because the constitution says you need to look after the people.
Yes, yes, it is. And this is not only happening in the urban areas. In the communal areas or in the rural areas, you see investments coming in without people being consulted, without people having given a prior and informed consent. So this has been an ongoing trend where the state has these kinds of developments, ideas of how development should look like. And when they engage in that, in the process, they dispossess people, which is actually not in the spirit of the Constitution, which is against the deprivation of people of their land rights. But currently there's a recent case that was had last year. It's a Kolobeni case.
Yes.
On that case, it was declared that the state can no longer introduce any form of development or deprive communities of their land rights without getting their consent.
Yes.
Yes.
South Africa has experienced a long history of forcible removal of people as a result of racist legislation. The Natives Land Act of 1913 was the first major piece of segregation legislation passed by the Union Parliament.
We believe that the land is central to solving every socio-economic problem that this country deals with. Without the land question being resolved, you won't deal with gangsterism, unemployment, drug abuse, HIV/AIDS, gender-based violence, because these are interconnected to the land question, because everything happens in the land. CTV is built on land. Where you stay is land. Where I stay is land. These new forced removals are because we're living in a racial capital situation where capitalism has a very crude racial aspect to it, that those who are black are those who are poor, those who are white are those who are moneyed predominantly in this society. So now, for instance, with gentrification in places like Woodstock, we see that poor people are being kicked away, the Bo-Kaap situation, and the situation in places like Blickensdorp, for instance, Khayelitsha, Mfuleni, all those places where our people are under the attack and they are being pushed to the periphery of the economy, as if it's like in apartheid where townships were created as labor camps for capital to get its people. So it's similar, but it's not the same, but it's similar. We are not going to get this land question if we're not organized. And also, we're not going to get the land question if the youth is not participating in politics. That's why I'm into these things, because I believe the youth, whenever it moves, any society moves.
Welcome back. You're watching Democracy in Action and we're talking land. This show is recorded in two parts. And this is the second part of our conversation where we're focusing on land, social housing and evictions. And with me in studio to discuss this, I'm joined by Katlego Ramantsima.
Thank you for having me.
Researcher with PLAAS, which is the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies based at UWC. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
We're also joined by the chairperson, let me get this right, of the Steenvilla Social Housing Action Committee.
That's
Got it
right.
right? Ms. Beryl
Schouw.
Schouw. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We're also joined by Sharon Davids, who is the secretary of the Steenvilla Social Housing Action Committee. Thank you to both of you for joining us. Katlego, let's start with you. In the context of social housing, what does security of tenure mean?
Security of tenure basically means the protection of your rights over the land that you use, whether it's for and specifically for residential purposes in an urban city area. There are legislations that govern evictions and relocations in South Africa, and that is found in the famous Section 25 of the Constitution, which basically gives the state the mandate to provide land to its people. Now, this is further defined in Section 26, which speaks more about housing, and it also states that the state should provide housing to its people to reside on. Now, as the years progressed, after the new dispensation in the year 1998, there was another piece of legislation that was enacted, and it's called the Prevention of Illegal Evictions and
It will come to you.
yes, but then for short it's called PI.
Yeah.
And what that does, it protects people within the city from being illegally evicted. So it also sets out a procedure for them to be evicted. So first it states that if the community has been living on a particular piece of land for more than 6 months, then that community should be provided with alternative land to reside on. If the community has been residing on that piece of land for less than 6 months, then a court order should be given to them. However, there should also be an alternative piece of land where they should use to reside in. So basically these are sets of legislation against arbitrary evictions in the city urban area, and they protect people who live within the city urban area to do that. It also provides for urgent evictions. However, these are also done with a court order, and are only if that area that the people or community are residing in is of danger to them. When that is the case, then an immediate eviction order can be given out to them. As we have seen in Johannesburg case of the Alexandra case, that community that was living on the Jaskei River, that was hazardous for them to live there. Then an eviction order was provided to them. However, alternative land for them was provided. So the state has the responsibility to provide alternative land.
And Katlego, we're going to come back to some of the elements that you raise around the state's responsibility to relocate people, because we see, and I'm sure that Sharon and Beryl are going to explain to us how those responsibilities are sometimes exploited by the city of Cape, by the city in particular. But we're going to come back. I want to bring Sharon into here because I saw you nodding your head in agreement. Sharon, tell us about Steenvilla. What is Steenvilla? And give us a picture of the people who live in Steenvilla.
Okay, Steenvilla is built in the heart of the Cape Flats. It is a social housing complex that was established for the poor by the city. Social housing initially was birthed by national government, and then national, province and city got together, and they formed this partnership agreement between the city of Cape Town, province is involved in it, and SOCO, which is the managing company, the tender company.
SOCO is the social housing company.
So yes, known as Amalinde Social Housing as well, and also as SOCO Property Investments. So I've been listening to Katlego, and she spoke about the PI Act. And just to bring it close, this social housing complex was birthed in 2009. It's a pilot project that they implemented here. This same company also ran a social housing institution in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, called the Abaslashli movement. I'm not sure if you're aware of it. And so we have followed up on them, and we've seen that they have actually done exactly the same that they were doing here in Cape Town, where they evicted the people. But in Cape Town, we managed to stand up in 2015 where questions were being asked regarding the rentals. To come back to the PI, exactly as Katlego said it, they have followed every procedure. They've even documented it this time. Prior to 2017, when they first evicted via the court, now they've implemented all these things, and they've put us out to be violent drug abusers and protesters, which is not the truth. This company has provoked the people. They have given the mandate, the power and the authority not alone just to evict, but to pull out the whole of Muizenberg police station, the Red Ants, and law enforcement with heavy armed machinery to fight the poor who are unarmed and not drug users. This we've got on video footages, and it's captured all over. The people that are living in Steenvilla, it's a mixed culture. So we've got all sorts, whites, blacks, Indians, you name it. Initially, it was established for the backyard dweller, the poor, the pensioner, everybody that needed to fit the criteria on the City of Cape Town's waiting list, who could fall into the social housing aspect where your income bracket had to be 2.5 to 7.5 to qualify for this social housing. Our rental escalated, which means it was 30% of your combined income, which means when I came into social housing, I had to earn at least 2.5 to enter into the social housing bracket. At that current moment, I only earned 2,200 Rand. However, I had to add in my children's maintenance, if I were getting any, and then also this SASSA grant funding that had to be added in, which would make me eligible for social housing. My rent at that time was 800 Rand. To our understanding, if it was that amount and subsidies were involved, why wasn't my rent subsidized?
So let me just get this now. So social housing in Steenvilla is the way that we would imagine social housing to be, targeting vulnerable, single mothers, the elderly, people who don't earn enough to own a house.
Yes.
The way you also describe is that it also is framed as an integrated community, a diverse community. So that ticks those kinds of boxes. Yet in 2017, more than 30 families were evicted. Beryl, come in here and tell us about the actual eviction. On what is the city basing this?
City is basing this on non-payments of rental. What happened is the first eviction took place on the 4th of August, and that is the day when they brought in social workers to remove the children from their parents, where the law enforcement came in. Now, City and SOCO was working hand in hand according to the city documents that we have here in front of us. The eviction then became so out of control that the people started reacting, because you must understand, never ever since 2015 when we started this case with the committee, that there was ever any protest, any like violence and stuff. The provocation came from SOCO and the law enforcement. That very same day, because of what they have done regarding the social workers that came in, the people got angry because they're not unfit parents. What SOCO has done is they've escalated the rentals so high that the people couldn't afford to pay. And me, as the chairperson of the Steenvilla Social Housing Action Group, with my committee, we then went forward to ask, can you not bring the rental down to make it livable for us? Because it's not that we don't want to pay rent. We want to pay rent. Because I believe everywhere you need to pay where you live. But it became so much more than your salary, because never ever was an order done for any of those people in Steenvilla where they have checked to see, did you get an increase on your rentals, or can you afford whatever we are putting on the document? But according to the regulator, to the Schouw documents, they have signed this document already prior to what we have experience, which means they've decided that every year the rental will be going up.
So can I just
and stuff like that.
Pause there quickly. So what you're saying is that the city of Cape Town signed on behalf, if you can say that, of the tenants of Steenvilla to say they agree to an escalation of the rental.
That's right.
But the escalation is much more than the 30%, the 70% of people's salary, in terms of the explanation of what that means.
That's right.
Can I just bring Katlego in here? Isn't this against or in contravention of the mandate and the constitutional responsibility of the state to make social housing available for families?
Absolutely, it is against the Constitution, because how do you trust the market to be, basically controlling how much the poor should be paying? I mean, it is unjust. These are people who are supposed to be subsidized heavily, but then now we see the opposite of it happening, whereby they are being exploited just to live, for a place of living. And the Constitution, even PI also says that this is absolutely wrong because of all circumstances, according to PI, of the elderly, the children, the women, the disabled, and all disadvantaged groups need to be considered. So if this is a social project, why is it that they need to be paying according to my market value? It is absolutely against the Constitution.
I want to bring you back now, Beryl, because off camera we were talking about how the city, well, in terms of the ownership structure, you are classed as owners of the unit. So just explain how that works, because it's also a social housing project.
According to the city document, or well, according to when we moved in there, we were told that we were going to pay 30% from our salaries, which means every person that has moved in there is 30% straight, from unit 1 to unit 700. A couple of years later, we found out that per document, even though we knew it was bond rates, that in this document, and I wish a camera can hang on there, that to say that there is 70% has been taken from our salary, which is bond rates. Nobody can afford to live there. Okay, we were told that we were homeowners association in the beginning. When questions started escalating, they said we were rental stock, and this is exactly what the tender document has done. The tender company has done. They went and told the public of South Africa that we were rental stock, that we have to pay rent where we are living. The people of Steenvilla, and I'm going to say this, they are very good people. There's lovely people living there. My neighbors is fabulous. They are not bad people. They come from different areas, and you know what? The way those people are living, and especially our pensioners, they cannot survive. They can't survive. These people are actually eating out of bins that cannot even afford it. What SOCO is doing, they are threatening our people with evictions all the time. Our people are crying non-stop because they feel that they've been exploited, right? What SOCO also is doing, and I'm going to mention her name is Rahma. She is the managing of the plant. They go to the doors of our pensioners, and then they bring in homes, which means it is people from old age homes, their nurses and stuff, to tell these people that it will be much better for them to be able to move into areas, houses like that, or cottages or whatever, because they won't be able to afford the rentals, so that they can sublet their units and make triple rentals. This is what they do. When you move in there, you have to pay triple the rent to move in there for rental stock, but in actual fact, they're charging bond rates for social housing, and our subsidies has been taken. 450 units in the first time was taken on institutional. Now I'm back. Institutional and the public needs to understand that we are not rental stock, but we were rated as rental stock because nobody questioned it.
Can I bring Sharon into this now, because I don't know if Katlego is also a little bit confused, because SOCO is a not-for-profit, state-funded social housing company. The way that you describe, Beryl, is that SOCO is operating as if they are a private property company. Just explain this to us, Sharon.
They are operating as that.
But they're not for profit.
They're making profit. They're not supposed to be making profit, but they're making a hell of a lot of profit off the poor.
Okay, explain.
Bottom line is that somebody is stealing from the poor. That is it. Yes, deep corruption. We know it, they know it. The thing is that we found it. We found a documented proof going as far. When we started this thing, it was done with a partnership agreement between the City of Cape Town and SOCO Social Housing Company. And in that document, there were various subsidies, and there was various grant funding, and all these things were implemented in, and we saw these big figures. Understand, we are just a lot of mothers that are just cheerful of moving around from pillar to post. So we found these documents, and in there was another part where they implemented indigent funding. Now, indigent funding is for people that are living in rental stock, that have fallen into some sort of vehicle, so they're not working. We went to apply for indigent funding. We were not given any. It was shut down. If you go to province sends you to city. If you go to city, they all send you back to SOCO. When did SOCO become a government entity on its own to make decisions regarding the poor when we were used from the city of Cape Town's waiting list to get into social housing. According to the document, the subsidy was taken out of a pool. Right now, the pool was out of the institutional subsidy. The institutional subsidy says that, listen here, the government says, listen, we are going to give the subsidy, we're giving it to SOCO to build units for the poor, which was us initially. According to the government gazette, the Social Housing Act of 2008, Tokyo Sesquale was then minister. And if I go through all of these documents, it basically says here that none of this rental should have exceeded 33% of the monthly household income as contemplated in sub-regulation 3. Sub-regulation 3 says a minimum of 30% of the units must support rentals or levies for the household earning less than 3.5, and then a maximum of 70% of the units must support rentals or levies from household earnings between 3.5 and 7.5. Now let me say, when they started off with the act. And everything was in place, and we know how they do their reports. They send a report to the city, they send a report to Schouw, which is the regulator. We don't want to leave them out because they've done no regulation where social housing is concerned. We've done our own regulation, we've done our own homework, and we can take you from Unit 1 to Unit 700 and tell you what is going on in each tenant's house at this current point as I'm speaking. When we come down to the bottom line of the evictions, it's just another showcase that they used to say, listen, these people don't want to pay. This is the reason we are evicting them. The court doesn't look at the agreement between City and Cape Town. It only looks at the PI Act regarding me, a tenant, and SOCO, the landlord, giving SOCO all jurisdiction to do as they please.
Katlego, help us to unpack here, because it would seem as if national government, provincial government and local government have a different agenda than what the Act and the Constitution says they should have. Am I missing something here?
No, you're absolutely right, Helga.
And what would that agenda be? Sorry.
Absolutely a very emotive topic because of it's people's lives that are impacted in Steenville. I see a whole lot of problems, and this also ties into administration also. Clearly, there is an agenda that is done by certain individuals. They have captured the project and made it theirs so that they can reap off the rewards. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yes.
But the evictions are done in an arbitrary way, and this is against the Constitution, and this is what the state should not be doing to the poor. However, I do not know, I wish I could also provide answers as to how to resolve this issue, because of it's not only happening in Steenville, but then across all urban city areas. And it seems like the state is not playing an active role by including the poor into the city urban area, but instead it is pushing them away by letting these people increase rentals, and letting the disadvantaged groups such as women and other women, children, the elderly suffer in the hands of pretentious institutions such as SOCO. So yeah.
And yet SOCO was established under they always say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and SOCO was supposed to be a not-for-profit to help facilitate our social housing project. But let me bring Beryl in here. Beryl, you mentioned earlier that your belief is that you need to pay for where you live. So SOHO is claiming that the tenants are in arrears and some didn't pay for more than a year. Was there any arrangements made to assist families?
Yes, there was. In 2016, I, myself and the committee went and made arrangements. We went to speak to Rob Sprong, who was the regional, who is the regional actually for SOCO. And we've asked them, give us 2 years to pay off the arrears. We've asked them. And we said to them, because there's no way that what we owe them that time we will be able to make it in a short space, because see that the rental is already high. And then he said to me, he'll get back to me. He phoned me back a week later to say, unfortunately, we cannot agree to a year, to 2 years, sorry, but we can only give you 1 year to pay. So I said, but that is impossible. How do you expect us to pay you 50,000 rand a year, plus our rental when our salaries is only 5,000 rand? If my salary is 5,000 rand, and then my rental cost about 3,000 rand, what is it that you would like me to pay for the arrears, and how would I survive? And this is the one reason why the rentals has escalated again into more arrears and more arrears. What I'm saying is, these people have defrauded the poor. There is no way you can hide this, and there's no way that city, the government, national and provincial, can put this under the mat, because they've been doing this for all the years. You bring something into the air, push it under the mat, let it die. This is what they are saying.
So when you say let it die, 2017 and last year we saw Plasticville, which was that the evicted families living outside of
Outside
the
in the
property.
winter,
We're now in 2019, and there's again, this is the summons Bible, as you
That's
called
right.
it, for more than 100 families who are going to, how many?
This is 108.
So there's 108
No, this is 108 that's currently at court. But we've already been judicated with the rest. That is already, say 60 people.
So we've
60
got-
units has already been judicated.
So we've got a new round of evictions
and
coming.
there's a new round.
My question is, and this is to Katlego, we see this is going to happen again. The first lot were relocated to Forest Village, but we know this is the ghettoization, because you go from the place where you live, where your kids go to school, the act offers you an opportunity to be relocated, but where do they relocate? So is this a new kind of forced removal?
Well, we can argue that, because I mean, I'm totally against evictions and relocations, and it is unfortunate that the city often opts to relocate people far away from the city. If I'm not wrong, yes, the river is quite far, it's at a distance. They do not take into consideration that the poor want to be close to the city, and it's not just a matter of convenience, but it's because of this is where their livelihood sources are, you know. So they don't make a comprehensive, you know, thought of how to relocate people within where they live. So this is you can argue, Helga, that this is another form of a forced removal elsewhere to
Okay.
the peripheries of the city.
We've got 1 minute left. I want just from the chairperson and the secretary of the Steenvilla Social Housing Action Committee, next step. You've got evictions coming in the middle of winter. What is the next step for the committee, Beryl?
We want, and this is what I'm stating, we want to be housed in our area where we are living. What we are telling social housing is, take your social housing, take it. If this is too much of a headache for you, take your houses. But you go into houses where we, in the greater retreat where we are residing, because this is where our memories are, this is where we are living, and this is where our works are. And I just feel what the government is doing to exploiting the poor, you should be disgusted.
Sharon?
Let me say this, we haven't done it, but I'm going to mention President Cyril Ramaphosa. I feel that his words just carry air, because he said in a public forum that Minister Noma India and Zokota were to sit down with us and resolve this issue, and this was done in December, when he already said that it is now July. Nothing has happened, change of government has taken place, and when Minister Noma India, Mfeketo, stood up and took a stand, she was removed. She's out of her position. You go to Bongin Nkosi Madikizela, we've been dealing with him since 2015. It is now 2019. He now has moved from MEC of Human Settlements into Public Works and Transport. And then we have our dear Mayor, ex-Mayor, Patricia de Lille, who has never come out to sit down with the people. Where do we find her? Public Works as well. Now we have our new MEC Simmers. I've engaged with him. He says, listen here, I didn't deal with this issue. This was Madikizela's issue, so this issue dies. You need to speak to Umguli. Umguli is head of department of province. He comes out, he said to the 37, because we were at the breakfast budget, he said, listen, out of the 112 names that came in at that time, we will house 72, only 37 were housed after they were evicted. We are saying, why must our people be evicted? Why must we be treated in such an undignified and inhumane manner, and our children be thrown on the outskirts of the streets? As parents, we can't even go and work because we're forever fighting a stupid eviction implemented by a government who is constitutionalized and is not acting according to the Constitution of South Africa. We're saying whose pockets are being fed while the poor are suffering on the outskirts. We are going to meet with Mayor Dan Plato later this afternoon in hopes that a resolution will come from this.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you, Beryl, and thank you, Katlego. Thank you to you at home for watching. Until next time, from me, Helga, and the crew here at Cape Town TV, good night.